Chris Jansing with NBC News.
Thank you. Mr. President, ever since the election, there have been protests on the streets of the United States. And earlier this year, Matt Lauer asked you if you believed you helped create the environment for Donald Trump to run. And you answered, talk to me if he wins about how responsible I feel about it. I wonder, do you feel any responsibility for the election of Donald Trump? And in the broader context, when you see his election, when you look at politicians like Theresa May, Marie Le Pen, do you believe that it is either a movement away from or an outright rejection of your worldview? And Mr. Prime Minister, you've also talked about your concerns about the rise of the extreme right in general, and about Donald Trump in particular. You said, I hope we will not face this evil. Do you believe Donald Trump or his ideas are still evil? And if so, do you believe your comments and the comments of other European leaders will make it more difficult for you to work with him? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I think it's fair to say that I was surprised by the election results, and I've said so. I still don't feel responsible for what the President-elect says or does, but I do feel a responsibility as President of the United States to make sure that I facilitate a good transition, and I present to him, as well as the American people, my best thinking, my best ideas about how you move the country forward. To speak out with respect to areas where I think the Republican Party is wrong, but to pledge to work with them on those things that I think will advance the causes of security and prosperity and justice and inclusiveness in America. I think it's important not to start drawing parallels, for example, between Theresa May, a fairly traditional conservative politician who's now Prime Minister, and Le Pen in France. Those aren't the same. And the situation in each country is different. I do think, as I said before, that history doesn't move in a straight line. It zigs and zags and sometimes goes forward, sometimes moves back, sideways. I think at times of significant stress, people are going to be looking for something, and they don't always know exactly what it is that they're looking for, and they may opt for change, even if they're not entirely confident what that change will bring. As you know, throughout my presidency, I'm sure as a matter of convenience, I generally haven't paid a lot of attention to the polls. But since your question is directly related to the notion of a rejection of my worldview, last I checked, a pretty healthy majority of the American people agree with my worldview on a whole bunch of things. And I know that that begs the question, well, how is it that somebody who appears to have a very different worldview just got elected? As I said, sometimes people just feel as if we want to try something to see if we can shake things up. And that, I suspect, was a significant phenomenon. I do believe, separate and apart from any particular election or movement, that we are going to have to guard against a rise in a crude sort of nationalism or ethnic identity or tribalism that is built around an us and a them. And I will never apologize for saying that the future of humanity and the future of the world is going to be defined by what we have in common, as opposed to those things that separate us and ultimately lead us into conflict. Take Europe. We know what happens when Europeans start dividing themselves up and emphasizing their differences and seeing a competition between various countries in a zero-sum way. You know, the 20th century was a bloodbath. And for all the frustrations and failures of the project to unify Europe, the last 5 decades have been periods of unprecedented peace, growth, and prosperity in Europe. In the United States, we know what happens when we start dividing ourselves along lines of race or religion or ethnicity. It's dangerous, not just for the minority groups that are subjected to that kind of discrimination or, in some cases in the past, violence, but because we then don't realize our potential as a country when we're preventing blacks or Latinos or Asians or gays or women from fully participating in the project of building American life. So my vision's right on that issue. And it may not always win the day in the short term in any particular political circumstance, but I'm confident it'll win the day over the long term. Because societies in which we are able to unify ourselves around values and ideals and character and how we treat each other and cooperation and innovation ultimately are going to be more successful than societies that don't. That's my strong belief. And I think I've got pretty good evidence to prove it.